Good day, everyone. It's a pleasure to discuss inflation targeting with you. We are the Team Del Pilar. I am Jessamita Niedo, your Bogalicious, and here are my report companions. Shaila Del Pilar, our team leader, the goddess. Jomer Mangilit, the hopeless romantic. Karen Joy Domingo, the silent but deadly. Case Vetlana Lapus, of course, our beauty queen. So by the end of the session, you will know the concept of inflation targeting through the use of monetary policy tools. To begin with, the concept of inflation targeting. Well, it is the act of influencing the level of prices in an economy through the use of several monetary policy tools. First is the price stability. So the BSP's main responsibility is to formulate and implement policy in the areas of money, banking, and credit with the primary objective of preserving price stability. Well, price stability refers to a condition of low and stable inflation. By keeping price stable, the BSP helps ensure strong and sustainable economic growth and better living standards. So how does monetary policy stabilize prices? So the central bank's monetary policy decisions are made to maintain a low and stable inflation rate over time, which is an indication of price stability. Like for example, during periods of drought or excessive rain, the prices of food could increase, and leading to an increase in the inflation rate. Price stability contributes to achieving high levels of economic activity and employment by improving the transparency of the price mechanism. Under price stability, people can recognize changes in relative prices, like for example, prices between different goods without being confused by changes in the overall price level. And this allows them to make well-informed consumption and investment decisions and to allocate resources more efficiently. The second one is the financial stability. Financial systems play a critical role for consumers, both corporates and individuals, because they bridge the aspirations of today with the economic futures of tomorrow. Historically, financial systems developed through the banking industry because of the nature of fiat money. Financial stability is essential for the conduct of monetary policy. This is because financial instabilities can curtail economic growth, as in the classic cases of bank panics. Banks, after all, manage our savings, offer critical services in the transfer of funds and the payment of obligations, while providing a venue for entrepreneurs to pursue their economic plans through credit, while banking authorities nurture this by defining the regulatory framework that encourages innovation while monitoring that banks operate with prescribed governance guidelines. So how does monetary policy help financial stability? So a key role of central banks is to conduct monetary policy to achieve price stability and to help manage economic fluctuations. The purpose of such open market operations is to steer short-term interest rates, which in return influence long-term rates and overall economic activity. The third one is the systemic risk management. The objective of financial stability is to enhance the resilience of the financial system in its totality and its components. This is done by managing systemic risks that could affect the financial system so that finance continues to be a value proposition to consumers in normal times when remaining resilient when disruptions do arise. This is the overarching global norm in financial system oversight. Given its different objective, not all bank-specific vulnerabilities are systemic, just as macroprudential issues cover other issues beyond banking. And since macroprudential policy focuses on interlinked risk behaviors, its concern can extend beyond liquidity or inflation. We have these main tools used in inflation targeting. The official interest rates set by the central bank can influence inflation. Lower interest rates are meant to help increase inflation, while higher interest rates are meant to be deflationary. So changes in reserve requirements on deposits are another monetary policy tool used to control the number of loans in the economic system, which affects consumer purchases and ultimately inflation. Open market transactions are also used to influence the level of prices, as they are meant to increase or decrease the money supply in the system. A higher money supply, other conditions held equal, is considered to be inflationary, and vice versa.
Hello everyone, I'm Shaila Odel Pilar and i-discuss ko is all about main tools used for inflation targeting. So una, i-define ko muna kung ano yung inflation. So halos familiar naman tayong lahat about dito na kung saan isa ito sa mga iniisip or nararamdaman nating mga consumer lalong-lalo na sa panahong may pandemic ay ang hindi mapigilang pagtaas ng presyo ng mga bilihin na kung saan mas nahihirapan tayo kada araw at dumadating yung panahon na hindi na natin kayang bilhin yung mga nabibili natin noon dahil sa patuloy na pagtaas ng mga presyo. Ang tawag sa presyo nito is inflation, na kung saan naaapektuhan dito is yung mga perang tinatabi, iniipon or kinikita ng mga tao. Kaya't dapat ang inflation is hindi natin binabalewala dahil isa ito sa dahilan kaya't dapat tumataas din yung sahod taon-taon ng mga tao. So next is ano nga ba yung inflation targeting? Inflation targeting is a central bank strategy of specifying an inflation rate as a goal and adjusting monetary policy to achieve that rate. Inflation targeting primarily focuses on maintaining price stability and to support economic growth. Kaya't meron tayong inflation targeting na pinapakita or nakafocus para ma-achieve yung pagbaba at stable ng inflation na kung saan ito ay nakakatulong para sa economic growth ng ating bansa. And most of all, ito yung strategy or goal ng central banks upang ma-maintain yung price stability. Dahil ang Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or yung BSP ang namamahala sa pag-unlad ng ekonomiya at pag-promote ng price stability at minimaintain nila na mababa at stable ang level ng inflation. So, through inflation targeting, pinoprotekta yung mga consumer at ini-ensure nila na reasonable at hindi mapang-abuso ang pagtaas ng presyo ng mga produkto. In short, yung inflation targeting, it is a framework na kung saan ang central bank ginagamit ang monetary policy tools para makontrol yung mga interest rate and para maging stable ang inflation ng ating bansa. The next is, meron tayong tatlong main tools used for inflation targeting, which is the interest rate, reserve requirement, and open market transaction. The first is interest rates. Interest rates can be an intermediate target that central banks use in inflation targeting. The central bank will lower or raise interest rates based on whether it thinks inflation is below or above a target. So in short, ito yung interest rate na sineset ng central banks na naiimpluwensyahan yung inflation na kung saan pag bumaba yung interest rate, tumataas yung inflation. Kapag naman tumaas yung interest rate, nagkakaroon ng deflationary. So, nangyayari ito dahil sa mga lenders na nagdedemand ng mga matataas na interest rates as compensation para sa pag-decrease ng purchasing power of the money they are paid in the future. So, yung pangalawa is yung reserve requirement. Changes in reserve requirements on deposits are another monetary policy tools used to control the number of loans in the economic system which affect consumer purchases and inflation. So, ginagamit ito upang makontrol yung mga number of loans sa ating economic system na nakaka-epekto sa pagbili ng mga consumers and also the inflation. So, ini-aim nito para ma-maintain yung mga consumer price inflation between 3% and 6%. So, yung value of currency is protected relative to domestic consumer prices. Yung pangatlo is yung open market transaction. Open market transaction are also used to influence the level of prices as they are meant to increase or decrease the money supply in the system. So, ginagamit din ito sa level of prices, and this is very important in monetary policy tools dahil tinutulungan yung Fed para i-pursue yung pag-maximize ng mga employment and pag-promote ng mababang presyo. So, yung central banks bumibili ng government bonds sa mga bangko when the economy is facing inflation. So, in that case, yung central bank is kinokontrol yung inflation by selling government bonds to banks. So, the next is, para ma-pursue yung inflation targeting goal, yung central bank is meron itong three important characteristic, which is the independence, credibility, and transparency. So, yung una is yung central bank independence refers to the freedom of monetary policy makers from direct political or governmental influence in the conduct of policy. Ito yung freedom ng mga gumagawa ng mga monetary policies from direct political or governmental influence sa pag-conduct ng mga policy, and napakahalaga nito dahil may mga evidence and pinupursu nila ang lower rates inflation without harming over economic performance. So, ang objective ng central bank is para kontrolin yung inflation and the monetary instrument ng ating bansa. Through central bank independence, kailangan nilang kontrolin yung mga perang ginagastos ng ating gobyerno. Yung pangalawa is yung central bank credibility is defined as a commitment to follow well-articulated and transparent rules and policy goals. Yung credibility ay napakahalaga dahil sa epekto nito sa level of inflation. So, yung function ng credibility is para i-observe kung ano yung pinagkaiba ng inflation and inflation rate na target ng central bank. So, yung credibility is the key ingredient para sa effectiveness of monetary policy and para din magkaroon ng trust and believe the economic agents that the central bank will act to ensure that meets its key policy objectives, especially in inflation. And lastly, the central bank transparency means that the central bank provides the general public and the markets with all relevant information on its strategy, assessment, and policy decision. So, in short, yung central banks is nagpo-provide in general public and sa mga markets na mga relevant information on its strategy, assessment, and sa mga policy decision. And also sa mga procedures in an open, clear, and timely manner. So, yung concept ng transparency is connected siya sa credibility na kung saan yung central bank na hindi transparent sa decision nito will ultimately lose credibility. Yan yung dahilan kung bakit karamihan sa central banks nagpo-produce sila ng mga quarterly reports na kung saan dinidiscuss nila yung mga state of the economy and yung mga trends in variable. Like for example, the money supply, securities markets, gross domestic product of the GDP, employment, and prices. So, yun lang.
Good day everyone. My name is Jomer Mangilit and my topic is all about inflation, historical data of the Philippines. So let's start with what is inflation rate. Inflation is the rate at which the value of a currency is falling and consequently the general level of prices for goods and services is rising. So we all know on our previous lesson that the inflation occurs when the purchasing power of money decreases and the price of goods increases. In other words, it is the sustained rise in the general level of prices where the one unit of currency buys less than it did previously. Inflation can be viewed positively or negatively depending on the individual viewpoint and rate of change. Inflation isn't always a negative. In fact, having low levels of inflation can have a positive impact on the economy. It's when it hits extremes that it became a major problem. Savings are devalued and the value of basic goods rises to the point that money becomes worthless. So the advantage of inflation rate is It increased consumer spending. The opposite of inflation is deflation. Goods good cheaper and currency gets more valuable. While this sounds good in theory, economists agreed that this result in lower consumer spending and economic growth. People tend to wait as goods become cheaper, hoping to get best deal. Inflation actually encourage people to spend their money as it actively getting less valuable. 'Di ba if the goods are cheaper, mas madami ang mabebenta ng isang tao kasi more people will buy dahil sa abot kayang presyo. At yung iba sa atin, hinihintay pa na bumagsak ang presyo ng isang goods bago bilhin para mas marami yung ma-save nila at mas marami yung mabili nila. So for the disadvantage of inflation rate, it makes the economy less competitive. A relatively high inflation rate can make exports uncompetitive. This can lead to trade deficits and slowed economy development. This is a major problem for nations that can't devalue their currency, like in European Union, without the ability to devalue the currency, it can be difficult to reestablish competitiveness. Kung mataas naman yung inflation sa isang bansa, as exporter, takot kang magpadala ng product mo doon kasi there is a high chance na hindi mabenta yung product mo dahil sa mataas na presyo doon. Dahil sa high inflation, nagiging mabagal yung galaw ng pera sa isang bansa kasi walang masyadong mga tao na gumagastos doon dahil yung pera nga nila ay walang masyadong mabili. And it can result to slow economic development. The annual inflation rate in the Philippines unexpectedly edged down to 4.8% in September 2021 from August's 32-month high of 4.9% and compared with the market consensus of 5.1%. Costs rose at a slower pace for transport with 5.5% versus the 8.4% in August. Food and non-alcoholic beverages with 6.4% versus the 6.5%. And education with 1.2% versus the 1.4%. At the same time, inflation was unchanged for clothing at 2.1%, furnishing and household maintenance at 2.8%, health at 3.2%, and communication with 0.3%. So the Philippine inflation rate goes down to 4.8% in September, which is good for us because the goods and commodities goes cheaper and the purchasing power of the money increases. Meantime, prices went up faster for beverages and tobacco with 10.5% versus the 10.2%. Housing 4.3% versus the 3.7%. Restaurant and miscellaneous goods and services with 4.2%. And recreation and culture with 1.2%. The latest reading stayed beyond the central bank's target of 2 to 4%. On a monthly basis, consumer prices were flat after gaining 0.6% in August. So the graph shows the Philippines inflation rate for the year 2021 and the end of the months of 2020. The lowest inflation rate on the month of November 2020 with only 3.3. Ito ay sinundan noong 3.5 noong December 2020. The highest inflation rate we had was on August 2021 with 4.9 inflation rate. In Philippines, the most important categories in consumers price index are food and non-alcoholic beverages with 39% of total weight, housing, water, electricity, and other fuels with 22%, and transport with 8%. The index also includes health with 3%, education 3%, clothing and footwear 3%, communication 2%, and recreational culture with 2%.
Hello everyone, I'm Karen Joy White Domingo and I'll be discussing the financial stability and microprudential framework. First, let's define financial stability. Financial stability is the state when prospectively systematic risks are mitigated so as to allow financial consumers, both individuals and corporate entities, to pursue viable economic goals while avoiding disruption to the smooth functioning of the financial system that can negatively affect the rest of the economy. The objective of financial stability is to have financial system that meets the needs of the public. Having financial system will allow everyone to run a business. At the same time, the disruption do not get increased. Financial stability is important to preserve good flow of financial system for consumer and corporation. Having proper financial market is important because it is the reason why corporations get high profit and the reason why consumers store savings, financial assets, and properties. Without financial system, corporate can be difficult to operate. Financial stability is all about enhancing the welfare of financial market and took a specific context as a result of global financial crisis. It's now understood and addressing the systematic risk. What is systematic risk? Systematic risk is that part of the total risk that is caused by factors beyond the control of a specific company or individual. Systematic risk is caused by factors that are external to the organization. Systematic risks are the interruption to any part of the financial system because it has ability to destroy the rest of the economy. The importance of managing systematic risk is simply because we do not want the economy to be risk. Systematic risks are the market risk, exchange rate risk, interest rate risk, inflation risk, and the calculation of systematic risk. We can reduce those systematic risks by macroprudential policy strategy framework. This framework reflects the thinking of financial authorities, the institutional arrangement, as well as the tools that will be used to sustain and enhance the health of the financial system. This health is specifically defined in terms of the system's resilience against systematic risk. Then, what are the macroprudential policies? Macroprudential policies are interventions used to manage systematic risk. The scope of concern is the financial system taken as a single unit. We do not focus on the health of individual institutions, and the system is not simply the sum of the different institutions. While some institutions may be designated as systematically important, the extent to which macroprudential policy has interest with them is limited to their impact on the system and not on the priority of their day-to-day operation. Macroprudential policy are typically classified either as those that manage systemic risk across different segments of the financial market, or those that can create systemic risk over the period of time. The objective is to address structural imbalance at any point in the time among different financial market components. For example, the issue is whether incentives regulation create risk behavior that build up over the time, which in the judgment of the authorities should not be allowed to be sustained over prolonged periods. Next, what makes macroprudential policy distinct from other policy objectives? There are similarities between macroprudential policy and other long-standing policy objectives of financial authorities. Like monetary policy, macroprudential policy is ultimately concerned with a strong macroeconomy. This is the point about systematic risk being defined specifically as having the ability to adversely affect the rest of the economy. But there are also important differences. There will be certainly bank-level concerns that did not concern to the macroprudential authority. just as there are macroprudential issues that are not specific to banks. In the same manner, inflation need not always be a macroprudential concern, just as there are issues faced by the macroprudential authority that go beyond market liquidity. The point is macroprudential policy has a different objectives and is most concerned with the connectedness, complementarities, contagion, and correlation between risk behavior that cause social outcomes to differ from the private choices of institutions. Then the authorities for macroprudential policy, the revised charter RA number 11211 of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas explicitly recognized financial stability to be a mandate of the BSP. A broad-level Financial Stability Policy Committee or FSPC has been created to discuss and act upon the different financial stability concerns. The BSP Charter further states that in pursuing this policy agenda, we will coordinate with other government agencies such as the Department of Finance, the Insurance Commission, the Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the Securities and Exchange Commission. These agencies convene as the Financial Stability Coordination Council or FSCC. Lastly, who benefits from having a national strategy framework for macroprudential policy? Having a national macroprudential strategy framework in place that is specifically available to all benefits individuals as well as institutions, all stakeholders can better understand how the authorities think of systematic risk, while being given the assurance that the pursuit of financial stability and the corresponding mitigation of systematic risk are being addressed at the highest level. Releasing the document also reflects the commitment of the Financial Stability Coordinate Council or FSCC to ensure that our financial market remains a value proposition that meets the needs of the public.
Institutional agreements, as per the BSP website, effectively managing systematic risk is a shared undertaking across many different stakeholders. Institutional arrangements are generally understood as a set of agreements on the divisions of the respective responsibilities of agencies involved in the collection, compilation, and dissemination of data pertaining to a given statistical domain. These arrangements ensure that the official statistics meet the needs of the users, follow quality standards, and are compiled and disseminated in the most efficient way. For the local, we have the Financial Stability Policy Committee of the BSP. The Monetary Board approved the creation of the FSPC to oversee and decide on the financial stability initiatives of the BSP. Meaning to say, this committee is responsible for devising policies and making appropriate recommendation for assessing and maintaining the stability of the financial system. This FSPC is also responsible for the preparation and issuance of an annual financial stability report. This committee was officially convened on February 26, 2020 by Benjamin Jokno, the BSP governor and the chairman of FSPC, and counting on the other monetary board members as the committee's members such as Carlos G. Dominguez III, Felipe M. Medalla, Peter B. Favela, Antonio S. Abacalan Jr., V. Bruce J. Tolentino, Anita Linda R. Aquino. And next, we have the Financial Stability Coordination Council. The council meets to assess possible systematic risk or disruptions to any part of the financial system that could greatly affect the rest of the economy. And they also decide on the appropriate policy interventions. The council can also collaborate with public and private organizations for data collection and research for its policy recommendations, as well as formulate and adopt its own governance and operational guidelines. For the members of this council, we have Benjamin E. Jokno, the governor of Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and the chairman of this council, Carlos G. Dominguez III, the secretary from the Department of Finance, Dennis P. Funa, commissioner from the Insurance Commission, Roberta B. Tan, the president of Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation, Emilio B. Aquino, Chairman of Securities and Exchange Commissions. Office of Systemic Risk Management. This office is created as a designated financial stability unit of the PSP. So all communications and queries are often communicated or answered through OSRM, which serves as the central point of contact for the network. And for the regional, we have the Financial Stability Board, Regional Commerce and Growth Association, or FSB RCGA. This board is an international institution that recommends risk and prudential standards for the financial market. So it just basically means that this board regulates and makes recommendations regarding the regional financial system, and this promotes and ensures that the regional financial stability by monitoring the regional financial scenario and making recommendations for the same. And lastly, the FS Network. This is launched on January 21, 2019, and this is a venue to raise awareness on financial stability issues and a means for facilitating an active exchange of knowledge, insights, information, and experiences among members in their respective pursuit of financial stability. So, this FS network is like the Office of Systemic Risk Management, but on the regional side. So, they are the main communicators or the main point of contact of every members to the BSP.